The basement smelled like old paper and dust, the kind of scent that instantly pulled him back in time. Daniel stood among cardboard boxes stacked like forgotten monuments to a childhood he barely talked about. He wasn't sure why he opened that box, but when he did, something fell out and rolled across the floor. It was a token, not just any token, a flipper coin from the summer of 1987. He bent down and picked it up, holding it between his fingers. Rust had crept around its edges, but in the middle, barely visible, was a tiny D carved with a pocket knife. He hadn't seen that mark in over 20 years. It was his brother's. Daniel blinked hard as a memory surged. The sound of arcade music, the clink of tokens, and his older brother's voice saying, "The last one's always yours." But his brother had disappeared one day and never came back. Now, holding that forgotten coin, Daniel knew this wasn't just about nostalgia. It was a message, a door creaking open to a chapter he never finished. And maybe it wasn't too late to go back. If you've ever held onto a memory that never left you, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that bring the past back to life. In the summer of 1987, the sun always seemed to set later, as if time itself was giving kids a few more hours to be young. For Daniel and his older brother Leo, those extra hours meant one thing: the arcade. It wasn't big or flashy, just a narrow room tucked between a bakery and a shoe repair shop, buzzing with fluorescent lights and the clatter of buttons. But to them, it was everything. Their kingdom, their safe place. They'd race there after school, their pockets jingling with a few precious tokens. Leo always had more. He was 2 years older and had a paper route, but he made sure Daniel never ran out. He'd press a warm token into his little brother's hand with a grin. "Save this one. That's your last life." They had a ritual. First was Galaga, where Leo would show off his reflexes. Then Double Dragon, where they'd play side by side, punching bad guys in pixelated streets. And finally, Street Fighter, where Leo would go easy on Daniel, just enough to let him think he almost won. But it wasn't just about the games. Between levels, they talked. About school, about cartoons, about the weird kids in class. Leo was the only one who really listened. The one who explained things that didn't make sense. The one who made Daniel feel like his voice mattered. The arcade owner, Mr. Sal, knew them by name. He kept a jar of spare tokens behind the counter, just in case, though everyone knew they were mostly for Daniel. Some days Sal would slip one across the counter and say, "Your brother's waiting for you." And Leo always was, already playing, already saving a spot. One afternoon, a summer storm knocked out the lights, and the whole arcade went dark. Kids groaned, buttons stopped clicking, and the machines powered down with a long electronic sigh. Daniel started to panic, but Leo took his hand and said, "It's just a pause, the game's not over." That was Leo. Calm, steady, like the glowing screen between chaos and comfort. Later, they sat on the curb outside with sodas and cheese puffs, watching lightning split the sky. Daniel looked over at Leo and asked, "Will we always come here?" Leo laughed. "Yeah, even when we're old. You'll be in a tie, I'll be bald, and we'll still suck at Pac-Man." Daniel laughed too. He didn't know that laughter could echo through decades. He didn't know that one day Leo would vanish and the arcade would be sold, and that memory would be the only place those afternoons would live. But for now, under that stormy sky, the arcade still stood. The games still worked. And Daniel still had one last token in his pocket. It started like any other Saturday. The kind of morning where the sun peeked through the blinds just right and the smell of pancakes drifted from the kitchen. Daniel bounded down the stairs with his usual energy, already asking Leo if they could go to the arcade after breakfast. But Leo was quiet that day. He sat at the kitchen table, stirring his cereal absent-mindedly, eyes fixed on something far away. Their mother kept glancing at him, her lips pressed tight like she wanted to say something but couldn't. "Are we still going?" Daniel asked, clutching the small cloth pouch that held their tokens. Leo looked up and forced a smile. "Maybe later. I gotta take care of something first." And that was it. No arcade, no games, no soda and cheese puffs. Leo grabbed his denim jacket and walked out the front door with a strange expression, part nervous, part resigned. He turned back once, gave a little wave and disappeared around the corner. He never came back. At first, everyone thought it was a misunderstanding, a friend's house maybe. Then hours turned into days. Police came. Questions were asked. Posters were made. But no one seemed to know anything. No leads, no answers. Daniel didn't understand. Kids at school whispered. Adults tiptoed around the topic. His mom cried at night when she thought he couldn't hear. But Daniel wasn't worried at first. Leo was his hero. Heroes didn't just vanish. So he waited. Every day after school, Daniel walked to the arcade alone, hoping Leo would be there. He played Gallagher with trembling fingers. He left a token on Double Dragon, hoping Leo would show up and grab player 2. He even sat on the curb with a soda, watching the sky like they used to, but Leo never came. The arcade slowly changed. Mr. Sal grew quieter. New kids took over the machines. One day, Daniel saw a couple of them laughing and tossing tokens, and he felt something twist inside. The place that had once felt magical now felt hollow, like an empty shell filled with echoes. Eventually, he stopped going. He tucked their last token, the one Leo had given him that Saturday, into a shoebox with some drawings, a plastic dinosaur, and a photo of the two of them smiling in front of Pac-Man. Then he shoved it to the back of his closet. Life moved on. High school, college, jobs, relationships. But the ache remained. Like a glitch in his heart he learned to live with. People told him to let it go, that some questions don't get answers. But Daniel never really believed that. He couldn't explain why. But deep down he always felt the story wasn't over. That somewhere out there Leo was waiting for him to play one more game. The basement hadn't changed much since their mother passed. Old furniture covered in sheets, faded boxes marked in her cursive handwriting. Daniel hadn't been down there in years, but now, as the house stood empty, ready to be sold, he knew it was time to sort through the past. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just closure. One box caught his eye. It was small, plain, shoved behind an old trunk. No label, just dust. He pulled it out and lifted the lid. Inside were things he hadn't seen since childhood: a wrinkled comic book with a soda stain, a small red yo-yo, a worn-out school notebook. And at the bottom, buried under some faded Pokemon stickers, something cold and metallic glinted in the light. He froze. It was a token. Daniel picked it up slowly, his breath catching in his throat. It was unmistakable, scratched and worn, but still bearing the faint, crooked D his brother had carved with a pocket knife all those years ago. His heart raced. He had lost this. He was sure he had lost it. He turned it over in his hand, like it might whisper something. And maybe it did, because suddenly memories came flooding back. The laugh of a brother, the buzz of arcade machines, a promise made on a curb under a stormy sky. His fingers trembled as he placed the token on the workbench. Under it was something else, a folded piece of paper. It was brittle with age, the edges yellowed. Carefully he unfolded it. It was a letter, or rather, the start of one. Daniel, if you ever find this, it means you're still looking. I didn't leave because of you. I wish I could have explained. Maybe it's not too late. There was no signature, just an address scribbled at the bottom, an unfamiliar town upstate. Daniel stared at it for a long time. He didn't know what to feel: relief, hope, anger. The ache that had lived inside him for so long stirred awake. Was it possible Leo had written this, that he'd left a trail, that he'd wanted to be found? He looked at the token again, now gleaming faintly under the single hanging bulb. It wasn't just metal. It was a map, a starting point, a new game. Daniel folded the letter, slid the token into his pocket, and exhaled deeply. Something had shifted inside him. For the first time in years, the ache was accompanied by something else, a sense of direction. Maybe it was finally time to follow the signal he had missed for 2 decades. And maybe, just maybe, Leo was still out there. The address scribbled on the letter led to a town Daniel had never heard of, 3 hours north, tucked between pine-covered hills and winding country roads. It wasn't on any map he remembered from childhood, but something about it felt familiar, like a place he'd seen in a dream he couldn't quite recall. He packed light, just a weekend bag, the letter and the token, which he now carried in his front pocket like a compass. As the train rattled away from the city, Daniel stared out the window and let the rhythm of the track sync with his thoughts. He wondered what he would find. If Leo was there, would he even want to be found? Had he been waiting, hiding? Had he written the letter and changed his mind, or had life simply moved him too far away? When Daniel arrived in the small town, it was near sunset. The streets were quiet. A breeze stirred fallen leaves across the sidewalks. It looked like the kind of place where time took its sweet time. He followed the address to an old neighborhood near the edge of town. The house wasn't much, modest, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. But there were signs of life, a wind chime tinkling in the breeze, a porch light left on, and a small potted cactus by the door. Daniel knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. He left a note. "If you're Leo, please. It's Daniel. I found the token. I need to understand." He walked to the center of town, unsure what to do next. That's when he saw it. A sign above a brick building, faded but intact. Galaxy Arcade. His heart skipped. It couldn't be a coincidence. He stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and nostalgia. Machines lined the walls, some dark, some blinking lazily like they were waking from a long nap. At the far end stood a man in his 60s, adjusting a power cable on a Street Fighter II cabinet. "Excuse me," Daniel said, his voice dry. The man turned slowly. His eyes were tired but kind. "Help you with something?" "This place, has it been open long?" The man chuckled. "It's barely open now. I reopened it 2 years ago. Used to be my brother's. He disappeared back in the 80s. Guess it runs in the family." Daniel's chest tightened. "I'm looking for someone, my brother. Leo." The man squinted. "Tall guy? Used to play Gallagher like a maniac?" Daniel nodded, unable to speak. The man walked to the counter, opened a drawer and pulled something out. A token. Identical to the one in Daniel's pocket, but this one had a small L carved into it. "He came here sometimes," the man said. "Never stayed long, but every few months he'd leave this behind. Said if someone ever came looking, to give them this." Daniel reached for the token with shaking hands. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The man behind the counter gave Daniel an address. "It's a few blocks from here," he said, placing the token with the carved L gently into Daniel's hand. He never said much, but I could tell he was waiting for something, or someone. Daniel stepped outside, the token clutched tight in his fist, like it might vanish if he let go. The streets felt heavier now, like every crack in the pavement had a story to tell. Each step closer brought back flickers of old afternoons, laughter over buzzing arcade machines, Leo's hand on his shoulder, the last glance before he disappeared. He stood in front of a small house with ivy crawling up the side. It looked lived in. There were wind chimes on the porch, just like at the other house. He hesitated, then knocked, footsteps inside. The door creaked open. For a moment, nothing made sense. The man before him was older, thinner, grayer. But the eyes, those were Leo's. Worn, weathered, but unmistakably his. They stared at each other in stunned silence. "Daniel!" Leo's voice cracked like it hadn't been used in years. Daniel nodded. He couldn't speak. His throat was tight, his heart racing. Leo looked like he might collapse. He leaned against the doorframe and whispered, "I didn't think you'd ever—" "I found the token," Daniel said finally, "in Mom's basement." Leo exhaled a laugh that sounded more like a sigh of relief. "I left it there. I hoped someday—" They embraced, awkwardly at first, then fiercely. 2 decades of silence collapsed in one moment, the kind of hug that stitches old wounds without a single word. Inside, the house was simple. On the shelf sat an old Gallagher cartridge, a faded photo of the two of them as boys, and a framed drawing Daniel had made in 3rd grade. Leo had kept it all. They talked for hours about what happened, about why Leo had left. Family secrets, mistakes, fear, shame. "I thought staying away would protect you," Leo confessed, "but I was wrong. I should have come back." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't need you to be perfect. I just needed you to be there." They sat in silence for a while. Then Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out the old token, the one with the D. He placed it on the table between them. Leo smiled, eyes glassy. You still have it. I never used it. Leo stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out 2 sodas. Come on, he said, nodding toward the door. There's one machine still working at the arcade. It's not much, but it still plays. They walked side by side, like they used to. The arcade was nearly empty. Leo slid a token into Gallagher, handed Daniel the joystick. Your turn, he said. Last token's always yours. The arcade lights flickered above them, casting faint glows over dusty machines and faded buttons. The screen buzzed to life, pixelated aliens dancing across it like they had 20 years ago. Daniel moved the joystick with shaky fingers, laughing quietly as he missed the first few shots. It's like riding a bike, Leo teased. Except the bike explodes when you mess up, Daniel grinned. They played in silence for a few moments, just the sounds of old-school effects and the faint whir of a machine built decades ago. For a brief moment, the years melted away. They weren't middle-aged men carrying guilt and questions. They were 2 brothers side by side trying to beat level 3 on a warm summer night. When the game ended, Daniel stepped back, his eyes fixed on the screen as it faded to black. That token, he said softly, wasn't just a memory, it was a promise. Leo nodded. One I didn't keep for a long time, but I'm here now. Daniel reached into his pocket and took out both tokens, the one with the D and the one with the L. He placed them side by side on the cabinet's edge. 2 worn pieces of metal, now priceless. He didn't need all the answers. He didn't need to relive the pain. He just needed this. A moment of peace. A moment of home. A moment with his brother. As they stepped outside, the evening sky was the same deep blue he remembered from childhood. The world had changed. But some things, like the bond between brothers, could always be replayed. Even if you only had 1 token left. Tell us where you're watching from and share your favorite memory from the past. What's your last token, that one moment you'd play again if you could?